In 1947, Time magazine ran a story about how the Mafia had taken over Las Vegas, and they were uneven trying to hide it. In fact, they were flaunting it in Time's face. They wanted them to know that they were there to stay. This was right after the end of World War II, and Las Vegas was just starting to become a tourist destination. And guess who decided to take advantage of that? You guessed it, the Mafia. The families that controlled organized crime at the time were the Bonanno, Colombo, Genovese, Lucchese, and the very powerful Chicago outfit. These 5 families saw an opportunity in this new town full of hopeful gamblers, and they decided to set up shop. But how do you move an entire criminal organization into a city? Well, first you need people. See, back in those days, being a mobster wasn't really a job you applied for. It was more like a lifestyle that chose you. Back when the U.S. was still fighting World War II overseas, many young Italian-American men enlisted in the military and volunteered to go fight for the country. Many of them, upon returning home, realized that civilian life wasn't all that appealing. But they didn't want to return to the life they had before the war either. That's where the Mafia came in. The Mafia offered these men a new purpose and a way of making money that could be much more profitable than anything they could earn working a regular job. So many of them accepted the offer. But there was another group of people who also made their way to Las Vegas around this time. In this group, they didn't have to be asked twice to join the Mafia. They were Jewish gangsters who had also fought in World War II, many of them in the Israeli Defense Forces. After the war, they returned to the States and began looking for opportunities. They found it in Las Vegas. Now, the Jewish gangsters brought with them a valuable skill set. See, during the war, they had been fighting against some of the best military minds in the world. They had learned things while undercover, and in the battlefield that would prove invaluable in infiltrating one of the biggest cities in the world. Because of their unique perspective, they quickly rose through the ranks of the Mafia and eventually became some of the most influential figures in the organization. And with the help of the army of new soldiers, the Mafia set about taking over Las Vegas. First, they needed to make sure the cops were on their side. At the time, the police force in Las Vegas was severely understaffed and corrupt. So the Mafia decided to help out by giving them a little bit of incentive. Frank Collota, a member of the Genovese crime family, worked with New York mobsters to bribe Las Vegas police officers so they would uninterfere with their illegal activities. The police were happy to take the money and looked the other way while the Mafia set up shop. At first, their presence in the city went largely unnoticed. But as time went on, they became more brazen and began to flaunt their wealth openly. They built huge casinos and hotels and hired thousands of people to work there. Soon, the Mafia was running Las Vegas. As the years passed, the Mafia grew more powerful in Las Vegas. They had infiltrated every aspect of the city. They controlled the casinos, the hotels, the restaurants, the nightclubs, everything. They also had a strong presence in the government. It bribed politicians at every level, from the city council to the governor's mansion. So how did they manage to infiltrate such a powerful institution? Well, it started with small donations to political campaigns, then moved on to outright bribes. The mobsters knew that the politicians were easily corruptible, and they took full advantage of that. Soon, they had enough influence in the government to protect their interests and make sure that no one would try to stop them. But not everyone was happy with the mob's presence in Las Vegas. There were a few brave souls who tried to stand up against them, but they were quickly silenced. The mobsters used their power and influence to crush anyone who tried to oppose them. They intimidated witnesses, they bought off judges and juries, and they even killed anyone who got in their way. One of the bravest people to stand up against the Mafia was a journalist named Hank Greenspun. He was determined to expose the Mafia's presence in Las Vegas, and he was unafraid to put his life on the line to do it. He published stories about mob activity in his newspaper, The Las Vegas. This angered the mobsters, and they tried to silence him. They threatened him, they attacked him, and they even tried to buy him off. But Greenspun didn't back down. He continued to publish stories about the mob, until he was finally driven out of town. Despite the efforts of people like Greenspun, the mob continued to grow in power in Las Vegas. They seemed unstoppable. But then something happened that would change everything. The FBI decided to take action against the Mafia. At first, the FBI didn't do much. They were content to let the mobsters operate freely and make as much money as they could. But that all changed in the early 1960s. The FBI began to crack down on the Mafia's illegal activities, and soon they were arresting mobsters left and right. This sent shockwaves through the organization and caused them to lose a lot of power. The mobsters were furious about the FBI's actions, and they tried to fight back, but it was no use. The FBI was too powerful, and the mobsters were eventually forced to flee Las Vegas. The FBI had won the war against the Mafia, but what happened next was even more surprising. The government decided to step in and take over Las Vegas. They didn't want the city to be controlled by criminals anymore, and they were afraid that the mobsters would come back and try to take over again. So the government passed laws that made it illegal to associate with known mobsters, and they also put in place measures to make sure that the mobsters could unbribe or intimidate public officials. These laws were very controversial, and many people argued that they were a violation of civil rights. But the government didn't care. They were determined to clean up Las Vegas, and they weren't going to let anyone stand in their way. In the end, the government's plan worked. Las Vegas was cleaned up, and the mobsters never came back. Today, Las Vegas is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. Every year, millions of people visit Las Vegas to gamble, party, and have fun, and none of them have to worry about being hassled by the mob. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, for one thing, we can see how powerful the Mafia was. They were able to infiltrate and control an entire city. They were that powerful. But we can also see how the government was able to take down the Mafia. With determination and a willingness to use whatever means necessary, the government was able to protect its citizens from the mob. Finally, we can see how important it is to have a strong sense of justice. People like Hank Greenspun didn't give up in the face of danger. They stood up for what they believed in, and they made a difference. If you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend watching another video I did about how the Mafia took over America. And if you want to watch more videos about the Mafia, then check out my channel. I've got tons of great content there. Thanks for watching.